Hi families, for our Intro to Literature class at Tyndale. This is Miss Katie and we are embarking on week 9 of our journey together, and it is week 2 of our exploration of The Little Prince, week 2 out of 3. So if you're joining us here because you're curious about The Little Prince and you missed the first video, go ahead and watch that for biography information about the author and some of the themes that we're looking for as we read together. So this story, we had a really good week 1 in reading it. We got through the pilot's crash landing in the desert, his meeting of the Little Prince, and then starting to learn about the Little Prince's life on his planet, the way that he views the world with wonder and imagination, and the way that he tends to his responsibilities. He tends to his volcanoes on his planet, he tends to the baobab trees to keep them from overcoming his planet, and then most significantly, when this beautiful flower arrives that can speak to him, he forms a relationship with this flower and tends to her needs, even though she's quite demanding. And so we've touched on those things. And I know that for children, this book can seem very abstract. And so I tried to point them in the direction of this is not a serious story in that the things that happen are not realistic, but remember, they're allegorical. Everything in this story represents something else. So we talked about how the Little Prince's love of sunsets and his desire to engage in imaginary play, almost with the pilot, represents his childlike wonder. And that's important to attain a sense of childlike wonder. And we talked about how he tends to the responsibilities that he has on his planet, another big theme in this story, that he keeps it safe by keeping the baobab trees from growing. And I know this is an abstract kind of random seeming thing to students that there would be baobab trees on this planet. But that's not the point. The point is that he tends to them and he keeps his planet safe. So we applied that in class, talking about responsibilities that students have at home. And so now the prince is leaving this week as we do our reading. The prince is leaving his planet and he's embarking on a journey. He doesn't say why. But he's going to go to some different asteroids and meet some adults on those asteroids and learn what they think are important. And we'll talk about that in just a minute, but I did want to give you a heads up that the things that the adults think are important are maybe not really the important things. And we'll talk about that more in just a second. The other note I wanted to make here at the beginning of this video is just to consider, if you're reading this at home or for your students, or if you're in my class and you're thinking about this book some more and what it means, to remember that the author, Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, he was living and writing during World War II, and he was far away from his home. And remember, he went and fought to help get his home back. So he's very much like the Little Prince in that he is in this kind of unknown situation, and he is far from everything he knows, and he's asking questions probably about what are the important things in life, because World War II, many people thought it might be the end of everything, and those who didn't think that were still struck by just an incredible amount of death and devastation and loss and grief. It was a very scary, very dark time for many people. And so here's this pilot and author writing this wonderful allegorical children's book about what are the important things in life. And also, particularly in this week, what are not the important things in life. So those are the things we're going to be thinking about as we walk through, especially our reading this week. And then next week, we're going to get to my favorite part with the fox. The Little Prince will meet a wise fox who does point him in the direction of the things that really matter. And some of the things we've learned that really matter so far, as I've already mentioned, having a perspective of wonder about the beautiful things like sunsets, taking care of what's been given to you, taking care of the people or relationships that have been given to you. Those are all really important things that we're seeing already. And as we move into the reading this week and encounter these adults on different planets, we're going to come across some things that maybe don't matter quite so much. So let's dive into that. Okay, so I'm going to summarize some of these encounters the Little Prince has, because we will read them and discuss them and hopefully act them out in class as we go through. But I want you not just to look at this in a literal kind of way, because again, this is a very abstract story. But encourage your students to look at what things represent. What does each of these things represent? So let's focus on that as we look at the story. The first planet / asteroid the little prince gets to has a king on it. And as you can see, his robe covers the whole planet. Now the king says, to a king, every man is a subject. And what this king wants most of all is to rule over something. And he doesn't really care what that is. In fact, when the little prince arrives, the king starts giving him demands that reflect things the little prince is already doing. So it's very easy for him to follow. So the little prince yawns, and the king says, I order you to yawn. Or, he sits down and he says, I order you to sit down. And the king says, I have the right to require obedience because my rules are reasonable. And so the little prince quickly learns that the king doesn't actually have any power, and he doesn't really have any kind of plan for the authority that he might have if he was a king with power. The only thing that matters to him is the appearance of being obeyed, the appearance of authority. So as students, talk about, like, is it important to appear to have power, or is it more important to have power and spend more of your time and energy focusing on how to use that power wisely and how to use it for good things? And that, sometimes adults can become entrapped by wanting to appear powerful. The next planet he meets, the conceited man. This is kind of interesting, who demands to be applauded. And the little prince applauds him, and he lifts his hat. And this goes on for a while. The little prince thinks this is kind of entertaining, but he doesn't understand why he should care so much about being admired, why it should be so important to him. And so after a while, he kind of loses interest, and he goes away, saying for the second time, grown-ups are certainly very odd. Now, then he goes to a planet where he meets a tippler. And this has to do with drinking and addiction. So I skipped this one for our class context. I just didn't feel like that was something I should bring up necessarily in class. But parents, if you're reading this at home with your kids, it is a good lesson to discuss. So I'll leave that up to you. Next, we went on to, he traveled to a planet with the businessman. And I think this one's very interesting. There he is. It looks very tough, and as you can see, he's counting something. He is counting up all the stars that he owns. He owns all the stars, and he's obsessed with counting them and with feeling how powerful he is that he owns all these things. But when the little prince asks, what he thinks about the stars themselves, he says, oh, they're little golden objects that set lazy men to dreaming. I have no time for that. I'm too concerned with matters of consequence. But of course, his matters of consequence are counting all the things that he owns. And the little prince can't figure out why it should matter to him that he owns the stars if he doesn't love the stars. But it's very important to this man that he owns everything. And he owns all the stars. So that's another thing we can talk about with kids. Is it so important to own something, to be obsessed with all the things that you can collect, all the things you can control? What is the point of that? And then I really like this point that the little prince makes in this section. He's confused, again, by all these different things that the adults seem to value. And he says that he owns a flower that he waters every day, that he owns 3 volcanoes which he cleans out, and that for him, owning those things is valuable because it's of use to the things that he owns. Like, it helps his volcanoes that he cleans them out. Like, it helps his flower that she belongs to him because he takes care of her. And that ownership, in the prince's view, has to do with taking care of things, with tending to things. And this is a very biblically aligned perspective. I think about when God gave Adam and Eve dominion over the earth, to care for things, to tend to them. And that's what a good king, a good ruler, a good leader should do, is to take care of the things that are underneath him. So the prince's reflection of that from a child's perspective is very biblically aligned and has to do with care and relationships instead of just appearances. That's very important. The 5th planet is very interesting as well. It's a man who has a job. His job is to light the lamps and extinguish them over and over. The little prince thinks that his is maybe the most valuable. He says, for at least his work has some meaning. When he lights his street lamp, it is as if he brought one more star to life or one flower. When he puts out his lamp, he sends the flower or the star to sleep. That is a beautiful occupation. And since it is beautiful, it is truly useful. So here we see some acknowledgement of beauty as being good, as having purpose in the world. But even though the lamplighter does this useful, beautiful thing, he just does it over and over again. Every minute he lights it and then he puts it out and he lights it. And he doesn't really know why he's doing this. He's following orders. From where he's standing, it looks like the sun's going up and setting every minute. So he just lights the lamp and there's no purpose. There's no purpose to what he's doing, really. He doesn't understand. He doesn't question. He just obeys the assignment. And there's a piece missing in that's not really explained to us, but we can kind of see it, that he's doing work and following orders and it's good work, but it's lost its meaning. And there's something to that, I think, to discuss with students. Lastly, we meet a geographer who is looking over maps and studying different places. And he knows about all these things, but he's never actually been there or seen them himself. And he says, geographies are books, which of all books are most concerned with matters of consequence. Again, there's that matters of consequence. And he believes himself to be too important to go and explore things on his own because he's the geographer. And he can't therefore go explore, which I think is really interesting. So he's not interested in experiencing it. He's just interested in the scholarly matters of consequence that he is in. Meanwhile, the little prince is going and exploring and learning through experience. So that is a wrap on probably the most important things we'll cover in class for week 2 out of 3 of The Little Prince. And I hope that you guys are enjoying this book if you're reading it at home or just in class. And I'm excited about week 3. It's my favorite part. And I just love it. I hope you guys are enjoying it. And let me know if you have any questions this week. See you in class.